Hello and welcome to the Sthenics podcast. My name is Dennis and today I'm here with Leo.
Hi everyone.
So, it's been a while since our last podcast, so I think we'll start up with a little roundup of updates, how training is going and how things are going, and then today we will talk about the handstand. So, Leo, how's training been going the last months?
Okay, so for what regards training, I think everything is going pretty smooth. Numbers are going up. I'm training for hypertrophy now, let's say, with some maintenance for skills and street lifting, as always, just to have some fun. The problem that I had in the last 2-3 months was especially just eating, because I don't know why. Actually, I'm around 74 kgs, but for the last 3 months, it was very difficult to switch from 73 and a half to 74. Don't know really why, because, for example, last year, also in January, February, I was easily at 78 kgs, and I was still hungry. So I don't know why. Now I'm eating more, not gaining weight that easily, and also activity levels now are lower than then. So yes, it's pretty strange, I have to say, but interesting. And yes, everything else, it's on point. No injuries, I hope, at least for now.
Not yet.
And now I have one or two more mesocycle of messing. Then I will do just a mini cut if I manage to gain that aimed weight, and then one more entire year of gaining before a very prolonged cut. So yes, I think that's
Sounds
it.
good.
So what about you?
Yeah, for me, training's been going up and down, I must say. I've been sick a lot the last 3 months. I've had COVID just now, but recovery is going extremely well. I've been traveling quite a lot. I've usually been doing that during deloads and not training at all, or mostly surfing or hiking when I was on holidays. But getting back into training, since I'm training for hypertrophy mostly now too, is extremely easy. I feel like when you work with higher rep ranges, you can like start off with the same weight. Maybe in the first week you do 2 or 3 reps less, and then you can just keep going after that and improving very, very quickly. So compared to when I was training skills or with very high intensities, where getting back into training is very frustrating and risky, or it takes more intro time, I can get back into training extremely quickly. So actually, for the fact that I've been sick quite sometimes, numbers have been going up constantly over a longer period of time than expected. But I'm enjoying it. I'm having much more fun in training than I had the last 2 years. Last 2 years training was quite hard with all the lockdowns we had, and a lot of tiredness after the first time I had COVID. And now I'm feeling like a human being again, and like much fresher and stronger than I used to be. It might be the spring too, but yeah, things are going very well. I'm training legs again. Been for a few months now, and progress there is very fast and fun. And I feel stable and good on squats for the first time ever. So all in all, I'm quite happy. I must say, I'm enjoying it.
What
Yeah.
What's your favorite leg exercise, if you had to pick one?
If I have to pick one, hack squat. I love hack squats over everything. Like I don't know why, but they just they're just fucking fun. And yeah, for weight gaining, when I'm traveling, I usually lose about half a kg. I don't drink enough beer to maintain the weight, sadly. So for next time, I'll have to drink more. But that said, I'm around 70 kgs now, which is I think 2.5 kilos more than in December. So it's slowly going up. And at the moment, I'm eating more than 3,500 calories a day, recovered from COVID, and it's It's not that fun, but it's okay. And yeah, I think that's it. I think we can start talking about handstands. So I think there's two questions that always come with handstand. The first one is, what base do I need to learn the handstand? So what muscle or strength do I need? Do I need anything at all? And how long does it take to learn the handstand? I would say we start off with the base. What is your opinion on like having strength and muscle for learning the handstand, Leo? Do you think a lot is needed, or do you think everyone can just go and start with the handstand?
Yes, let's say that it's, in my opinion, something in between. So I don't know, if you are the first time in the gym, probably it's not the best idea to go directly and try to do handstands. Of course, not free. That would be crazy, but neither handstands with assisted to the wall. So yes, I think you need to have some basic strength. Let's say on the other side, you don't have to be a superhero. So yeah, something in between, and mostly the muscles that you have to prepare are the delts, of course, and I would say also a little bit the traps, but usually when you especially the upper part of the trap. But yes, usually when training for shoulders, delts, usually also the traps are involved at least somehow, and just by doing some military presses, pike push-ups, also push-ups if you want. So the basics of calisthenics training, you can build the necessary strength to at least start to train it. So yes, I don't know. Do you have some exact numbers? Do you want to give some exact numbers
I
to be a
think,
little bit more precise?
I don't know, like usually when somebody can do a few pike push-ups, I have a feeling he can already start doing the handstand. If a handstand is performed well, it's actually not really a strength exercise, and you really don't need a lot of muscular strength. But that always depends on your mobility. Of course, if your mobility is poor, there will be more involvement, and you will need more strength to perform it. But you can see like often kids that have almost no muscles at all managing to do handstands. I think the thing you need to be most careful about when starting off with handstand is that you condition your wrists a bit, that you have a good warm-up routine for wrists, that they get used to having your weight on them, and that you don't go from 0 to 100 from one day to another. I think the most common injuries in handstand is like people just go and keep going, keep going, keep going. That's something I see often, like now that I train in a commercial gym. Like I see people that just try around 20 to 30 handstands in a row against the wall. And like if you're not conditioned and you're not used to it, that is the best way to get hurt. So warm up your wrists well, and a few sets a week, like around 10 sets a week to start off, maybe even less in the beginning is more than enough. And look to build up some strength and being comfortable and being like putting your own body weight on your hands. Of course, if you're heavier, you will need a tiny bit more conditioning and more time to get used to it. So don't forget your body weight in the equation either.
Yes, and also if you think about it, there are a lot of hand balancers. Male hand balancers are very strong for what regards shoulders, but on the other side, there are a lot of female that can hold a handstand for a prolonged time, and they are not. I mean, some girls are not even able to do a handstand push-up back to wall, let's say. And if you think it also in CrossFit, where the handstand it's the same in CrossFit. Usually the handstand are done a little bit differently. They are more, let's say, banana prone, because they also need to
walk.
walk on hands. And yes, because they don't pay that much attention, they don't need to pay that much attention to the handstand. That it's a kind of handstand that it's even harder for what regards strength, because it's more demanding on your shoulders and everything. And also in that case, a lot of time the girls that can walk on with handstands are not strong for what regards shoulders. So if you really want some numbers, I don't know, I would say 5 bike push-ups with feet elevated in order to start. It's probably a good idea, and
It's
it's
a good
allowed.
idea, but I think even less is like
Even yes, just to be on 100% sure, I would say. And yes, and the traps, with doing properly handstand pike push-ups, so switching from depression to elevation in the last part of the movement, also the traps will be developed, and you will develop them even further with correct why if you use correct technique while training the handstand, I would say.
absolutely.
I would maybe give the which is describe the correct technique for a free handstand.
Okay, so free handstand should be well aligned, meaning wrists, shoulders, hips, and feet should be in one beautiful, nice line. The shoulders should be elevated, is one of the few exercises actually where we want elevation in the shoulders. The shoulders, this depends a lot of, like, I think in the handstand world there's many opinions about how exactly a handstand should be like performed. In calisthenics we're not too exact about it. Many talk about like externally rotating the shoulders to create a slight protraction for a more beautiful line, but that's very individual, and it always depends on the hand balancer you're talking to at the moment. Very important is the posterior pelvic tilt in the hips. The glutes shouldn't be contracted too much. That is something that is different in calisthenics too. When performing handstand push-ups and strength exercises, more contraction of the glutes and more stability in the core will be useful for the exercise. Well, if you are training towards endurance, you should actually be quite like not bringing too much tension into the body, but having it like you're standing up in a resting position. So just a slight tension in the quads and pointed feet. That is the correct handstand form. It's something you see quite rarely in calisthenics athlete, mostly because front delts get trained a lot, lats get trained a lot. So calisthenics athletes generally have a bit of a kyphosis, usually rounded shoulders and a tight lat, and I'm a good example for that too. Always had problems opening my shoulders well and going into a nice handstand. And posterior pelvic tilt, especially upside down, is something you really need to put in some work to be able to do, and choosing the right assistance exercises is crucial to that, and we'll talk about that a tiny bit later. Anything to add maybe?
Yes, maybe the grip wide. So usually, if you talk with hand balancers, they prefer a very narrow grip. Sometimes also a little bit narrower than shoulder wide. So I mean, if your reference is my shoulder wide, so that's very very large. But in general, for hand balancers, it's pretty narrow. But for calisthenics, usually we want to learn the handstand in order to also learn then the handstand push-up, which is one of the most wanted skills in the beginning. And for that, usually you need a slightly wider grip. So that's usually a little bit wider than shoulders. So yes, if you just practice it for just because you want just to learn the handstand, then you can use a narrower shoulder. For handstand push-up, a wider grip. For handstand push-up, a wider grip would be better.
Yeah.
And of course, if you learn it with narrow grip, it's not a problem to open then the grip
Exactly.
once you have learned it. And the last thing I think is the head alignment.
Yeah, exactly.
Also here also it depends on the goal. So if your goal, if you just want to learn the handstand, just in order to hold the handstand, then usually you keep the neck aligned also. So with the physiological curve of of the spine. So usually, yes, I don't know how to describe that in English.
I think, I mean, you can, most people have an easier time looking just between the hands when holding a handstand. And for a better alignment, usually you want to tuck your head in, actually. Or,
Okay,
yeah.
yes.
That makes a more beautiful line, but balance wise, it's difficult because you don't look at a point that is close to you, but you look somewhere else. And if you ever have tried to tucking your head in, you probably, if you're not used to it, will fall.
Yeah. So for normal handstand, you tuck the head in, but if you want to learn also the handstand push-up, you have to look toward the floor, because I don't know. I never tried it. I never tried a handstand push-up with a head tuck, but I can't imagine how
It's
to
extremely
perform
difficult.
that.
It's extremely
Okay.
difficult.
Yes. Yeah. So I think we are, and yes, of course, the legs, the legs have to be straight. So slightly activations of the quads also, in order to not bend your knees. It's rare, but it can happen. And it can happen more frequently that the elbows are flexed a little bit. So elbows fully extended, because otherwise you're really making the exercise harder than it should be. So you are engaging way more muscle. So a good handstand, the better the technique, the easier it will be to hold it. So yes, that's very important.
The harder it will be to balance, and the easier it will be to hold, usually, from strength wise. And I think that is a big point in learning the handstand and how long it takes, because I think there's rarely a skill where the differences between athletes are so big. I have the feeling it's one of the skills where, as a kid, if you played a lot in the park, if you climbed on trees, if you like tried cartwheels and tried to stand on your hands as a kid already, you already have kind of a feeling for it. And some people just pick up on balance quickly, and others, even though they have the perfect alignment, they know what they're doing, they're used to doing belly to wall handstands and can hold them for ages, they still have problems just finding balance being upside down. And so it can really take from a few months, which is usually the case for most people. From 3 to 6 months, most people manage to hold a halfway decent handstand, to some people that take 1 to 2 years to really learn to balance. And balance is something you can't, like, it takes the time that it takes. You can practice more and more, but you have to always be careful of what else you're doing and to not hurt your wrists. And too much sometimes is doesn't work either. And always finding the right amount of work and just a lot of trying is always part of the handstand, sadly. And that is something you can't periodize or you can't control as much as with other lifts or in other sports. So time that it takes to learn the handstand is extremely variable. For how long did it take you to learn the handstand, Leo?
Yeah, so I think that both you and I are not great examples of how to learn the handstand, because I think we both learn it with attempts. So I was just, for me, it took, I think 1 or 2 months by just jumping into position, but it was the classical banana handstand. So my reference were the Bar brothers, Frank Medrano. For me, it was amazing. So I was very proud of it. But yes, that so we can say 1 2 months, and then I don't know. I think that I found the right alignment once I learned more about gymnastics and that kind of environment. But yes, that was so. Yes, I think we will talk also about the steps to learn it. But yes, Dennis and I are not a great example of how to learn it, because yes, I had some small lower back pain due to the fact that I was doing such a huge amount of attempts. But other guys that were training with me by doing the same things, so I was pretty lucky, I have to say. So a little bit of lower back pain, and that was it. But I didn't have problems with wrists, with elbows, with anything. But all the other guys that were training and trying that same method with me had a lot of problems, and yeah, so that wasn't at all the best method to learn. So I mean, they were, I think, half an hour, maybe also more of attempts, 3 to 4 times a week. So
The
yes,
classic.
not ideal at all.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Like for me, I actually don't know how long it took me to learn the handstand. I mean, my handstand's still ugly, so I still can't really handstand. If you ask a hand balancer, but I learned it. Like I think the first handstand I held, I actually pushed, like I did a push-up, a handstand push-up. Like I started from the push-up position and then pushed up in like an ugly banana handstand, and that's how I learned the handstand, like by doing back to wall handstand push-ups and holding them free at some point, which led to me never really making a beautiful handstand.
I really
So
remember a huge, a very strange sensation in the lower back by doing the handstands in that way. So every time I went down from the position, then it was very strange, like a lot of stress, never a lot of pain, but yes, something
I
wasn't something wasn't on point at
Yeah,
all.
I'm hyperlordotic by nature, so I'm used to being in this position. So for me, the lower back was never a problem, but wrist pain, I did have that happen. So the classic. Very good. So I think we cleared that up. So if a beginner comes to you and tells you he wants to learn the handstand, let's say he has already maybe a few basics, so some strength is there. You don't need to do a real strength work with him for the handstand. What would you program for him if he maybe like he's a bit scared of going into the handstand still? He can maybe hold some handstand back to wall, but he still isn't really secure with the position. What would you let this client do to first of all get more comfortable with going into the handstand, and what exercises would you use to improve on that?
Okay, so yes, like you said, it's very important to see if the client, the athlete, is scared of the handstand position. If because it happens that someone has never been upside down, so for him it's a completely new sensation. Because yes, a lot of people when they are young playing with yes, when they are children, you play and you do handstands to the wall, so you are a little bit used to get upside down, let's say. And if this is not the case, so if the person, the individual, is scared, then there are two exercises I would say. So one is the tripod. So I don't know how to describe it. So, but you basically put your hands and your head on floor. So you create a triangle with them, and then you do yes a handstand, but assisted with head and hands. So that's usually not hard for what regard balance. Maybe you can have a friend or someone assisting you in order to be less afraid of it. But you will see that I mean, in a couple of trainings, probably you can get it. And this is a method to just start feeling the sensation of being upside down. And the other, it's just do I don't. Just put aside the technique and just find a way to get back to wall to get a back to wall handstand. So probably you will need someone, because it's also hard to jump into position in the beginning. That's what scares the people the most. And the problem is that if they bend a little bit the elbows, then it becomes very hard for what regards strength, and then they don't know what to do. So it's very useful to have someone physically taking your legs and bringing you into the right position, assisting you in a way that you can stand the elbows, and then step by step he will assist you less, and you will see that and at once, like magic, it becomes very very easy. And then from there at least you have learned what does it mean to be upside down, which is a big goal if you never did that in your life. And from there, I think that the progression is pretty standard. So once, yes, from then, what we do usually, it's not to focus on the handstand back to wall, but we focus on the handstand belly to wall. The handstand belly to wall really helps you in learning the right alignment. So once the individual is in a handstand belly to wall, and once you have gave, and once you give, and once you give him all the right inputs for what regards technique, then you can start after some attempts, of course, because you need time in order to yes, to implement that the suggestions that the trainer is giving to you. And once we did that, we do this. From there, the trainer is able to evaluate which are the problems with your activations and everything. Maybe you are not able to hold the posterior pelvic tilt. Maybe you have a hard time in elevating the scapulas, which is very common. And from there, we will give the client the proper activation exercises, which we will cover later. And yeah, so the first thing is to really try to fix the technique and learn a correct alignment in a handstand performed with belly to wall. And once the client, and for this work, I don't know how you do, but I usually program straight sets. So I give an exact number of sets, an exact number of seconds, and if the technique is okay, then I go up with seconds. But it's always done with a lot of buffer because no need to push too hard here. So yes, and once the alignment is okay and the client is able to hold the belly to wall handstand 15 to 25 seconds easily, we move to the next step. And usually the next step is are the handstand scissors in my case. So usually I use the handstand scissors. And yes, important thing when doing belly to wall handstand, so you have to cover all the aspects that we mentioned before. So posterior pelvic tilt, elevation, maximum shoulder flexions, and yes, and all the others. But it's important to stay close with the hands to the wall. So you don't have to stay too far away from the wall because that breaks the alignment simply. And yes, from there we go into the handstand scissors. And the handstand scissors, do you want to describe them? Maybe it's easier for you.
Yeah, can do so. I think maybe one thing I would add when learning the back to wall handstands, one thing that is very useful, at least for people that are especially scared of handstand, is already learning how to get out of it. So maybe like learn to go towards one side. And that is one thing, like when you go in, that one leg is always closer to the chest than the other one. So one leg's leading, one leg comes with you when you go into the handstand, which makes it easier to enter. And if you go out, you put one leg first down and then the second. And that will teach you to bail out of the handstand. You will notice that if you go into a handstand and you try a free handstand, you will automatically then go towards that direction. And for the belly to walls, it's very important too, because getting out of a belly to wall handstand can be quite awkward in the beginning and scary, that you like have your side and you know, okay, if I put one leg down and then the second one, I am safe. And so you take away the fear, and in the beginning you can start a tiny bit further away from the wall, and then you get always closer to the wall. Maybe the last thing and most technical clue, once you've learned all the elevation and posterior pelvic tilt, is the chest position. Like you want to bring the rib cage in, which is extremely difficult for many people if you don't have the mobility. So really pressing the chest towards the wall is maybe the last and most technical clue, which you mostly see do people that do hand balancing, where you really create that extremely beautiful line. For the scissors itself, we take the step. Usually we don't like go completely scissors. We will keep some belly to wall work just to have a constant and keep working on balance and the feeling. And you will get a tiny bit more far away from the wall. 3 hand widths, maybe a tiny bit more. One leg touches the wall, and the second leg goes a tiny bit over your alignment. So then you try to get one foot away from the wall and you try to find the middle. So you do little scissors where you touch the wall with one leg and then with the other leg, and you switch between one and the other. And in between you will have always this little moment of balance where you slowly start to learn how to use your fingers to balance actually. So the balance should come, in the best case, out of fingers. You shouldn't balance too much with shoulders or triceps or using strength to do so. There's different hand positions handstand balancers use. Some people like to lay on flat on their fingers. I usually grip the floor. It gives me more control over the handstand. And some people have this half concave position in the hands. It's quite particular, but it's something you see too. That's something I, for example, can't do at all. But learning to balance out of your fingers while maintaining the alignment is extremely important. And yeah, after the scissors, the holds will be longer in the scissors. We always try to find more balance, and then really starting to have sets where starting from belly to wall, you hold the handstand. For some people, and for example, tend to then always fall back against the wall. It's useful to maybe implement even back to wall handstands again, where you're a tiny bit more far away from the wall. That's something I like to do, where people go into the handstand and then they learn the overbalance. So you learn to overbalance and underbalance and control it in both positions. So if you go into a handstand free later, you can always find the middle. And once you start feeling comfortable on your hands and you manage to hold 5 to 10 seconds constantly, it's time to slowly learn the kick up and holding your first free handstand. That is probably the most frustrating part about learning handstands, really getting into it, kicking up and holding it. For that reason, it's extremely important that you keep having belly to wall, from belly to wall handstands, and maybe even some belly to wall handstands in your training, because otherwise it can get very frustrating very quickly. Yeah, I think. Do you have anything to add otherwise?
Yes, not too much, but I would just underline the fact that when doing the scissors, the goal of the scissors is just to get that instant where you are not touching the wall at all. And once you are comfortable with that, you just program. Maybe you can make an example of programming that would be that will make the things even clearer. So when programming the belly to wall, usually 2 times a week it's enough. 10 to 15 set it's enough. You can split them between 2 or 3 trainings. Yes, usually 2 it's enough. 3 it's okay also. And then when you start to program with scissors and holds, you cannot program straight sets anymore. But what we like to do is to program the so-called to program attempts. So for example, you give the client a number of repetitions that he has to complete with the scissors. So for example, what we do, the frequency in this case, I like to bring the frequency up. So usually when I start to program scissors, I program always 3 times per week if there are no time complaints or anything. So because for the handstand, I think that we can go a little bit higher for what regards frequency, because it's not a hard movement and you need a lot of practice, and everything which requires a lot of practice for what regards technique, I think that 3 times per week, it's a very good choice to start. But I have also clients that train it 4 and no 5. I think I don't, but yes, if it I think that hand balancers train it even 4 to 5 times per week for sure. Even more, probably even more. Yes. And what we do in this case, we give a number of attempts. So for example, first session, you have to complete 15 reps of handstand scissors, but we always give a time cap. So, and we write 15 reps of handstand scissors, maximum 15 minutes of work, because like Dennis, like you said earlier, you can have really bad days in handstand, and it doesn't make sense at all to stay there all the session, being frustrated. Also because usually you just you don't train just for handstand, but you have a lot of work to do after the handstands. And if you spend 1 hour, 2 hours in handstands, then you are fried for the rest and also demotivated due to the failure. So usually it's a good idea to give a time cap of 15 to 20 minutes, a fixed number of attempts, and then if on average, so because like Dennis told, the handstand it's not progressing linearly. The important thing is that it's progressing on average. I would say monthly. Yes, that it's progressing monthly a little bit. It's important. Okay, so don't expect to progress from session to session, but monthly, yes, it should be on average. You should get better results. And once you're able to complete easily the given amount of reps in less than 15 minutes, then you can add some reps. And then from there, once you are very confident in an exercise, then you start with the next one. And after the scissors, like Dennis told, like Dennis said, I like to implement very, very short holds. So 1 second, and count. And also in this case, I give 12 reps of 1 second. Okay, so yes, this is how I do this. And then from there, once the seconds are completed, the reps are completed, I just raise gradually
The seconds to hold.
the seconds. Yes. Yeah. And in this case, it's in order to implement some variation, I think that I like to do, it's to, I don't know, if the handstand is trained 3 times per week, what I usually do, it's on 2 sessions to start from belly to wall, but then also to have some variation on 1 session. Since the alignment now it's very clear, I tell the client to start from back to wall, just to train it a little bit differently.
Yeah,
and that this is a thing that yes. And then everything is like that is told. Once the hold are long, you are ready to train it on floor.
Very nice. Regarding assistance exercises, I think this is one of the biggest thing that I've noticed over time with working with a lot of clients. Many people think they don't have the right shoulder mobility to do the handstands. And instead, what we've noticed is that most people don't know how to get into elevation the right way. So I think if there's like one exercise that I would advise anyone to do right now, if you're working on a handstand and you're starting off, or even if you can hold your first handstands free, but they're banana handstands, try to go from elevation into depression with a belly to wall handstand. This exercise has worked wonders, so to say, for so many people. Really learning the right activation and really going into elevation teaches people how to engage the traps correctly and how to actually hold a beautiful alignment and how to get the front delt more out of the equation. So that is one exercise that we let most clients do. Of course, if somebody comes and has a beautiful elevation, you won't need it, and it would be a waste of time. Maybe the hips aren't in the right alignment. The exercise you can use there is in belly to wall, switching between a posterior and an anterior pelvic tilt. That is something you probably need to train when standing first, because it's kind of a weird movement, and of course, being upside down, everything is even weirder. And the last thing you can work on, and that is very advanced and probably very useful only once you're actually already have a beautiful handstand, is learning the right rib cage position. That takes a lot of time too, and a lot of practice too. Most of our clients don't have aspiration to do extremely beautiful handstands, but if somebody, for example, wants to learn a one-arm handstand or things like that, it's a step that you should do before. At least I'm of the opinion that in calisthenics, most one-arm handstands you see, the people should actually learn a beautiful handstand before doing so, and not just holding them by strength. But that said, these 2 exercises for sure I would implement. Anything else? I think with scissors and belly to walls, some back to walls, we cover it all. I can't think of anything else. Can you think of something?
No, so like you like you said, so in the past there was this trend that in order to do handstands, you need to do tons and tons of mobility. So, which is nice. I mean, if you have mobility goals, if you enjoy doing mobility, then it's completely fine. But what we find in practice, it's that a lot of time is just a matter of activation, like Danny said. And so once you have mastered these two exercises, so if you have problems with the hips, focus on switching from posterior pelvic tilt to anterior pelvic tilt while doing handstands belly to wall. If you have problems with elevation or shoulder flexion, in that case, do the other exercise. And once these two are mastered, then, and you still don't have that great alignment, in this case, it can be a good idea to try to do some mobility exercises. And usually what fixes the problem are simply nothing exotic, just normal shoulder flexion exercises. There was also the trend that, if I remember correctly, that started from gymnastic bodies, and maybe it's something that all the gymnasts do that, but it seemed for a while that having a good bridge, it's a must in order to have a good line or to just train handstand, which, I mean, in practice, really, that's not the case. I mean, for someone, the bridge is simply impossible, or maybe someone is just tight for what regards quads. And so if he's limited in the quad, if his bridge is limited by quads or psoas, why should that matter for a handstand? So yes, I think that almost everyone has the correct spine mobility that will allow him to do a handstand. So it's, I don't know, I've never seen someone
I feel like the bridge is useful if done correct. For example, if I do a bridge, I can actually do a bridge, which is sad, but my mobility comes 100% from my lower back, meaning my lower back can bend so much and I have such a high flexibility because of my hyperlordosis there that my rib cage won't get engaged. So what, for example, is extremely useful for me in part is elevation depression, and secondly, for example, exercises where I put myself on a foam roll, I actually keep the hips down so I can't like evade the mobility using my lower back, and putting my hands under an object and actually really opening up my rib cage. So my flexibility, especially because of my tight lats and how big my rhomboids are like, I am extremely tight in this area, more than the shoulder flexion itself, which is a tiny bit of a problem, but less than actually my rib cage. And so therefore, like, if you learn the bridge, it's like an extreme long process, and it's too much. Like, it can be useful if done correctly, I feel like, but it's not needed. There's things like a few little things that you need, and there's people with not that great of mobility but a beautiful handstand line. And the thing that for many people is a problem, they maybe have the mobility, but they don't have strength in that range of motion, and therefore they need corrective exercises like elevation depression in that position too, so they can actually learn to activate it and not only just be in a passive stretch.
Yes, and I mean, the bridge is okay, useful, but I think that the most useful thing of the bridge is that it's in fact training your shoulder flexion.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, but if you feel pain if you're compensating like Dennis, really doesn't make any sense. And of course, guys, now that you have heard us, you are maybe thinking is so if lats and rhomboids are a limiting factor in handstand, what should I do? Should I get smaller? And that's not the solution at all. Who cares about handstand? The most important thing is being huge. So always keep that in mind.
He said it. I think on this beautiful note, we should end the podcast. I think, like, maybe now you can hold your first handstand. What now? Since you're calisthenics people, we learned the handstand push-up. Like, the handstand is just a means to an end. The handstand is actually extremely useless. The only thing you need to do is, like, being able to push up and grow those delts. Now, But honestly, most people that do calisthenics, some people have the ambition to learn the one-arm handstand afterwards, and there you need to put a shit ton of work in. You will have to work on holding your handstand for at least 30 to 60 seconds, somewhere in that range. Really being comfortable being on your hands and being able to hold it before progressing and learning weight shifts and things like that. Maybe we can talk about the one-arm handstand since Leo was able to do it for a while, not anymore because now he's too huge to do it. We can talk about that if you're interested in that. But I think the next thing we'll talk about that you probably are more interested in is now I learned the handstand, now I can hold the handstand. What are the steps to learn the handstand push-up? And we'll look at that in another episode. So I hope this was useful and you learned something from it, especially that getting huge is the most important thing. And I guess we'll see you next time. Any last words, Neil?
And yes, I would add that from now on, we will be really committed and we will bring out one podcast each week.
Well,
So-
you know the internet doesn't forget.
So yes, it was nice. I think, yes, we covered everything. And see you next week, guys.
See you next week.